All right, let's go ahead and continue, right? So we just finished talking about those proteins with fingerprints on the cell membrane. Now to get into membrane transport. So how do things actually physically move through the cell membrane? So there's something called diffusion, there's something called osmosis. And I'm going to have videos for you to watch. Watch the videos because they'll be very helpful where they're animations of diffusion and osmosis. The word diffusion, what it means is molecules moving from an area of greater concentration to an area of lesser concentration. For example, if I had air freshener and I went sprayed some air freshener, right where I sprayed it, there's tons of those molecules. And then they'll slowly move across the room. Okay, that's diffusion. So certain things, really small things, can move through the membrane through diffusion. Okay, what are they? The two things. Well, more than that, but three we're going to talk about. Oxygen can move through diffusion, right? Oxygen molecules will go where there's more oxygen to where there's less oxygen. So think, for example, in the lungs. Inside the lungs, there's air, okay? There's these little air sacs called alveoli, and there's air. There's more oxygen here than in the cells here, okay? Okay, so there's more here than here. And what will happen is the oxygen can diffuse from where there's more to where there's less. That's diffusion. Carbon dioxide, there's more here than here. It goes from here to here. Water can also move through the membrane through diffusion. And water is so important that osmosis is the diffusion of water. So which way is water moving? From high concentration to low, and osmosis is the diffusion of water. So here it shows, let's say we had a cup of water and we put like a dye. There's a bunch of molecules here, and then they'll move to where there's less, and eventually the whole thing will be the same color. So it's showing diffusion from area of high concentration to low. Here, simple diffusion. So oxygen goes from where there's more to where there's less, and it can actually physically move through the membrane. It's small enough, it can transport through. Carbon dioxide, where there's more to where there's less, is diffusion from higher concentration to lower concentration. And so these two things will move through. Okay. Now, some molecules are too big. They can't just pass through the membrane. So it's called facilitated diffusion. So think facilitated. If I'm going to facilitate something, that means I'm going to make it easier. So the molecules through facilitated diffusion, again, diffusion, so they're going from where there's more to where there's less. But in this case, they can't just go through the membrane. They bonk, they can't go through. So they have to use that transport protein, right? It says channel or carrier molecule, okay? So it's facilitated because it's using the channel protein or the carrier protein. It's diffusion because it's going from high to low, okay? But using the membrane protein, okay? So again, I'm going to have videos on this, and it really helps to look at the videos. There are animations showing you that. So yes, facilitated diffusion. Most molecules can't get through the plasma membrane on their own, like oxygen and carbon dioxide. So they need those carrier molecules. So what moves through the cell through facilitated diffusion? Sugars, okay? So glucose will move through that way. Amino acids, remember amino acids make up proteins? They move through facilitated diffusion. So oxygen, carbon dioxide, water moves through passive transport or simple diffusion, simple diffusion. Bigger molecules like amino acids, carbohydrates move through facilitated diffusion. Okay, sometimes people have defects in transport proteins. It says can reduce or even bring facilitated diffusion to a complete stop. You can see how that would be a problem. Serious health consequences. Many genetic diseases are caused by this. All right. Osmosis, that special case of diffusion, specifically of water. so water can go into and out of the cell. Water tries to maintain, it kind of gets to like an equilibrium where there's the same amount of water inside and outside. And you're like, who cares? Who cares about water? Well, this is pretty important because, for example, let's say you end up in the hospital for dehydration, okay? If you're dehydrated, what does it mean? You have less water, yeah? And let's say, for example, they have to give that person, I won't say you, I'll say another person A, right? And they have to give them IV fluids, IV intravenous fluids, so straight into the veins. Are they going to give them straight water? Okay, if they gave them straight water, what would happen is the water would go right into the cells from area of high to low, and it would burst the cells. Literally, the red blood cells would burst. Okay, so they don't do that. So what they give them is they give them a solution that has solutes, the sugars, and well, sometimes sugars, the salts, the same, and water concentration, the same as the cells. So that way it's equal, the water movement in and out of the cell. So they don't burst the cells or they don't shrink the cells, okay? Don't worry about hypertonic, hypo, and isotonic tonicity. Okay, that's showing that. Okay. Now, what about molecules going from low to high concentration? Cells can do this. They can move molecules from low to high. But in order to do that, it takes energy because molecules want to go from high to low. Okay? So it's called active transport. The word active is implying energy. So it takes energy, and the energy is in the form of ATP. Okay, we're going to talk about that in the next chapter. Okay, going from low to high. So I'm going to have another video. So I'm going to have a video of diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. So please, again, look at the animations because they're very helpful. So anyway, yes, make sure you look at them. So here we're going from low to high. So again, that's not the way molecules want to go. They want to go from high to low. So to go against the concentration gradient requires energy, and the energy is coming in the form of ATP, right? Primary active transport uses energy directly from ATP. You don't have to worry about secondary active transport. All right, so those are some movements through the cell membrane. Some other movements, endocytosis, exocytosis. So endo means into, cyte means cell. So endocytosis, what if the cell wants to move in more stuff into the cell, bigger stuff into the cell? So endocytosis, okay? Exocytosis, exo, exit, think of exit, moving things out of the cell. Exo means going out, cyte means cell, exocytosis, so moving stuff out. So endocytosis and exocytosis are used for bulk transport of molecules. So when things are too big, they're just too big to go through those little proteins, those membrane proteins, then we can have larger movement through the cell, right? Phagocytosis, pinocytosis, receptor-mediated endocytosis. Again, I'll have videos of this so you can see it. Phagocytosis. Look at this. This cell is eating this big thing, okay? So phago is eating cytosis. So the cell's eating, okay? It's bringing these arms, and again, I'm going to have a video for this so you could see it, using the arms to go and grab the stuff, which it can do. So it's moving the membrane to go around a big particle, okay? So that's called phagocytosis. And again, I'll have a video, really cool video, okay? You gotta watch it because you're like, oh my gosh, how can cells do this, okay? Pinocytosis means cell drinking, okay? Where let's say the cell wants to sample some of the stuff from the outside, it kind of caves in, right? It's called invaginating. It caves in and takes in the stuff from the outside, but it's taking a lot of stuff, big particles and so on. So that's pinocytosis. Exocytosis is actually the reverse of pinocytosis, moving stuff out of the cell. Again, faulty cell membranes, right? If the membranes aren't working right, it's going to cause problems, okay? So they talk about that. Exocytosis, the opposite of endo. So let's say here's the inside of the cell. Where is it? This should be not intra. Intracellular fluid, extracellular fluid. So here's the cell, and then there's a little vacuole or vesicle, and then it's gonna boop, and then stuff's gonna move out of the cell. And so here's the cell membrane, right? And here's like a cell membrane too. It's phospholipid bilayer, but it's not the actual big cell membrane. And then that'll fuse and then release. Okay. Lastly, talking about cell membranes, how do cell membranes help with communication with cell and another cell? So you see like these telephone poles and communication. How do we do that? Connections between cells hold them in place, enable them to communicate with one another. This is an important slide showing you different types of connections between cells. Tight junctions, what they're going to do, there's protein here. What they're going to do is they're going to hold the cells together so that they don't rip, no ripping or tearing, okay? So here it says tight junctions between small intestines, okay? Desmosomes act like Velcro. They fasten the cells together. So with the heart muscle, you can have desmosomes. Gap junctions, just like the word says gap. If there's a gap, there's a space. So here, there could be, here's one cell, here's another cell, and then here's a protein where things can move into and out of from one cell to the next, right? So gap junctions act like secret passageways that allow material to pass between cells, okay? So these are different types of junctions in between cells. Some, like these, things can't move between cells, but here with the gap junctions, things can move through between the cells. All right. All right. So it's just talking about some disorders. Okay. So lastly, okay, we're going to have one more video, right? And the last video what we're going to talk about are the organelles, okay? My gosh, we spent so much time. We spent so much time on the membrane, okay? But again, the membrane is how the cell, here's the inside of the cell, here's the outside of the cell. The membrane is how cells communicate with other cells, how cells communicate with the environment, taking things into and out of the cell. So it's a really important part of the cell, okay? Now here the inside, okay? Now with the next video, I'm going to hold you accountable to the things I talk about because in the book they have more detail. Focus on the things I talk about in the video. So the cell, what's on the inside and what do these different things do? Okay, so we're going to pretend the cell is like a factory, and we're going to talk about the different parts of the factory and their jobs, okay? But in this case, we're going to be talking about the organelles, right? The tiny organs and their jobs. All right, so we're going to go to the next video.